So I'm going to get started. I had a thought that I wanted to start with, John. At the beginning of your book, in the preface, you were talking about being at the PMA conference in 2007. And you mentioned that at the end of the day, only 25% of the participants that raised their hand to a question you had really truly knew the history of Pilates, and that Pilates was even about the work that was started by one personal individual. How do you feel about that now? Do you feel like it's gotten better, or is it still, would you say, the same percentage? Or what are your thoughts about that? Because I found that almost tragic to some degree for what my thoughts were. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's not an accurate survey, but I think it's changed radically. I think the book has helped enormously over the last year or so. Certainly, PMA did help for a while. I spoke 2 or 3 times. Alyssa interviewed me a few times, and I think it started, some kind of awareness, a sensitivity. The tragedy of the 25% to me was that only 25% knew 2 things: that there was a person named Pilates, mm-hmm. and that he had died some time ago. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, here we were really now 6 or 7 years after the lawsuit, mm-hmm. 3 or 4 years into PMA, mm-hmm. and 400 people were there, including, I think, Alyssa. And only a quarter of them at the Pilates convention, mm-hmm. Had this information, and yet they were teaching it every day. They were using the name every day. The name, mm-hmm. Pilates itself had become very, very popular in the media. It's nowhere near as popular then as it is now.
Right.
But and here's someone I had a great deal of affection for, and who had quite an I don't think I need my glasses.
It looks good either way. There you go.
Okay, I can still see.
As long as you can see what's going on, that's great.
Yeah, I can. So at any rate, after all of that, that was quite a surprise, and I think I've done stuff to help it get mm-hmm. known.
When you look back at that, do you wish it was different from the results of the lawsuit to maybe have changed the path of it, or what?
No. I mean, this is one of the funniest phenomenons in any kind of a consumer business. This thing just sat dormant, and then it started to grow by itself. It wasn't like somebody took it over and put a big advertising. It came and it went, and it never came very strongly till the 90s, mm-hmm. and then the lawsuit, which didn't, I don't think, have a great effect on it. It mm-hmm. had a great effect on the professionals, the studio owners, because they could mm-hmm. breathe a sigh of relief that they weren't going to get sued for teaching Pilates. But mm-hmm. it grew, this is a total word of mouth kind of phenomenon, mm-hmm. and it went from nothing to huge mm-hmm. very quickly. Mm-hmm. So no, I don't have any feelings that
I had a question come to me from someone who's on the call here, but I know he's in an airport, so I don't know how his connection might be. And Tom, feel free to jump in if you want to ask it yourself. But the question was that at the end of the book, you write that all types of Pilates are good, but you don't really distinguish between teachers who have trained in these 600-hour trainings and really intensive trainings versus those who have only taken a weekend and kind of do it because it's the thing to do type of thing. Is there something, do you have thoughts on that? I mean, do you have thoughts that it should be more specific, like going back to that 2007? Should it be, are we training people correctly to be teachers, or, where do you go with that? Because there's a lot of programs out there that aren't teaching that Joe Pilates was a person who created
Yeah, I
Pilates,
know.
and this is how we do it.
I think that's a fundamental question that's actually quite divisive in the community.
Yeah, I agree.
And what you're really asking deep down is how should this be regulated? I mean, PMA tried to do that. How should this be regulated? Who should the regulators be? And how restrictive in terms of teaching curriculum and teaching hours and the tests and continuing education can it be? Now, had Sean and Romana prevailed in that lawsuit, you would have had one extreme. You would have had a totally autocratic dictatorship of all these standards. If Romana didn't approve it, if you didn't teach enough turnout or pull your toes back when you were doing this or that or whatever, you weren't doing Pilates. There are people that still feel that way, and I respect that entirely. On the other hand, the real test for the consumer is, do they come back the next day? Are they getting something out of it? Certain people are going to get more out of it than others. They're going to go into it deeply. Many of them are going to go on to teach or want to teach or get their friends in it. And some people are just going to be there and get, an hour or 2 hours a week of excellent exercise and movement. And that's what they will take away from it. My personal belief is I don't believe in a lot of autocracy. I don't believe in censorship. I don't believe in restriction. I think the consumer is the one that certifies you. If they go to you and they come out of that session saying, I love it, I want more, I don't care how many hours you've put in, you've done your job. You've got someone interested, that you're going to help their lives. You're going to make them feel better every day. Perhaps get their family involved and all that. I will tell you, I went to a Pilates in a small town in the south of France. And the guy who taught it owned basically martial arts studio. And he went for a weekend or 2 weekends to somebody in Marseille who certified him. He was a martial arts expert. He was a great teacher of martial arts, and he was one of the best Pilates teachers I ever had. So there you go. He had that instinct that Joe had about the human body. He knew how it worked deep down, instinctively. And he knew how to teach movement. He knew how to cue you into stuff. He knew how hard to work you. He knew what pace to keep. Now, he didn't get that in 2 weeks in Marseille. 2 weekends in Marseille. He had 99%. Joe wasn't taught. I mean, or certified. He had 99% of it inside of him. Well, there are great teachers in Pilates that have that same skill or talent or ability or art.
Elisa, I think Elisa had a question regarding this.
Yeah, in relation to all of that, John, you talk about this a little bit in your book, but do you feel that Joseph Pilates would have liked to, if he had lived longer, or there are other methods of exercise like gyrotonic, for example, where the owner, the founder, creator has made a brand and a trademark out of their method and kept very strict control over it. Do you feel that that would have been something that Joseph Pilates wanted for himself?
You have to deal with the personality of Joe Pilates. I mean, and I try to get this across in the book. He had this wild ambition and obsession with contrology, and believed that everyone should do it, everyone. And yet everything he did in his own studio or gym and his own practice actually worked totally against it. He was the only one that could do anything to adjust the routine or to modify the routine. He never really taught anyone else to teach it. They could help him for years. But he was enormously jealous of anyone else teaching his method, as contrasted in the book with Ron Fletcher, who Ron, in fact, made a point of teaching people how to teach it and explaining things to them and trying to get across his interviews. Joe didn't do that at all. It wasn't his personality. He was crazed if he thought anyone else was going to take the method. And there were people of very good will that were dedicated to him that tried to get it into a trust, tried to get it into a foundation, tried to get it all down on paper with photographs and all that stuff. And and he went along with it for a little while. And then he exploded at one of their meetings and all of a sudden went through this. I'm not a witness to this, but I am someone who's heard it from several people. And I actually heard it somewhat from Joe. And all of a sudden went into this rage, thinking that people were trying to steal it from him. And even with Bob Seed, the gun incident, well, yeah, no one likes to have competition and no one likes the thought, but you don't go over, put a gun to people's head. I mean, that's pretty extreme. So what he would have thought about it is it's kind of a two-sided question. One side is, wow, look what's happened to me and my name and what I invented. Isn't this amazing?
Did you happen to, sorry to interrupt, but did you happen to, Carola Trier was teaching and running a studio. Several other people were. I understand there was another studio in Atlanta. And I don't have the details off the top of my head, but I've heard of other studios that were going when Joe was alive. Do you, you don't know about those though?
Oh, I do know about them. Sure.
And did Carola come in, and how did he feel about Carola?
Well, yeah, she occasionally came up at the end of the day and would talk to him and talk to Clara. I didn't see her maybe once or twice, but Kathy Grant was 2 blocks away. He never went to either of the studios ever. He sort of ignored them. He knew Carola and Kathy knew the work very well. And he was indifferent to it. It was such a small thing then. He didn't feel they were going to take his clients. They had their own and developed their own client. With Bob Seed, I don't know exactly what he was really worried about, because
Maybe
he may have been worried that Bob was going to take me. That was his first question, which is, has Bob contacted you? And I said, why? He said, well, he's over, a couple of blocks away. He's taking all my morning students. And so it could have been just that, but
I have a different question. Someone who couldn't be here today, Cassandra, was asking if you had any memory and if you could demonstrate.
I have very little memory.
The way that Joseph Pilates taught you how to breathe.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, and it's in the book, breathing was everything. And yeah, I have told many an instructor who's watched me breathe and told me I'm doing it incorrectly, that what he taught me. And basically,
can you demonstrate for us?
No, I can't. I mean, my stomach is so big, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between an inhale and an exhale.
Okay.
He taught me to breathe the same way he taught opera singers to breathe, woodwind instrument players, and I'm one, I play the flute, to breathe. And that is to get that diaphragm as low as possible. The only way to do that is to get your belly out as far as possible on the inhale. Get your hips into it. Get everything you can down there open. Get your diaphragm down there and get that air in. But if you concentrate not so much on that, but on getting it out, it was the exhale. Get it all out. And then if it comes out, your body will immediately, reflexively take it in. And when it's going in, let it keep coming. Keep it going. Get it in there. And whether you teach moving, inhaling against the work or with the work, I think that's a personal preference. I mean, I have preferences on some exercises that I like to inhale when I'm contracting. That's sort of anti-Joe. And exhale when I am relaxing. I get a better exhale, a better inhale. And others, I do it the other way around. But that was crucial to him. And when I was writing the book and trying to, remember what it was like being with him, and I made the point in the book that when he took over my breathing, which was lesson number 1, it was better. I mean, it worked. All of a sudden, instead of kind of fighting the breathing, he had me breathing, and it was more relaxed. I was getting more air in, more air out, and the rhythm of the breathing started to synchronize with the work automatically. And so, you have to concentrate for a while. Okay, I'm inhaling, exhaling, and pretty soon it's vital. It's absolutely vital. It's vital when you take a walk. It's vital everywhere throughout your whole life.
Thank you.
How you breathe.
It really is. Related to that, Marjorie was wondering if you had any knowledge that Joseph Pilates studied yoga or any kind of reflexology, any other methods. Did you ever feel like he had an influence?
No, the word study for Joe, they don't go together. No, he didn't. He didn't. He never said anything bad about yoga or good. But things like weightlifting and weight training, hated the thought of that. Just hated the thought of it. Aerobics.
Did he say why? Why?
Well,
Did he say why?
he didn't like strain. I mean, and you all know that. What he wanted was this stretch, this relaxation, this letting
Like
your muscles go
supple.
and then contracting them, but all with. That's what he wanted, and weightlifting was exactly the opposite of what he wanted. He just thought it was terrible for you. He was so focused on contrology. He had no interest in any other sport. He had a number of golfers that he took care of. He knew that was a completely stupid sport for your body because it's all one way. But also being a dentist or a barber is a very difficult sport for activity for your body, or a painter, or anything where you're one-sided and twisted and do all of that. I mean,
regarding that, John, Pam said he himself used dumbbells as part of his equipment exercises, right? There was heavy dumbbells at Drago's anyway, that was with Romana, but didn't he use heavy, at some point, heavier weight load with men?
Who
dumbbells?
said that?
One of our participants here wrote in the chat that he used dumbbells, right?
Never.
Never? No.
Oh,
okay.
Not a chance in hell. The only weight we used, the canvas shoes that I talk about.
Yeah.
That you had two pairs. You had one pair that fit your foot. And then there was another pair that you either got from him or, I don't know, ballet store. That was a clown size. Into that, and not for everybody, but I got upset. He gave you these absolutely primitive steel plates cut out to the shape of a foot. Not yours, but maybe an average foot for a man, average for a woman. And you put the plate in the bottom of the shoe, and you did very few exercises with the plate in your shoe. And I don't.
Do you remember any of those exercises? Were they like
no, but they weren't like leg circles or teasers, or they were much stretchier. I can't remember. I mean, I never saw them again after Joe died.
Right.
Never. So, but no, barbells, no, they were not something anyone.
Not part of the protocol, the repertoire.
Or nowhere around or anything like it. I mean, the whole trick with most of Joe's reformer work, at least, was working toward fewer and fewer springs. The fewer springs, you do the star with no springs,
right?
And you have done.
Yikes.
You've done it all. I mean, one spring is damn hard as it is.
Right.
But or any of those long stretches, his whole thing was he'd take a spring away from you and you'd struggle.
This same participant asked what your thoughts are on the archival exercises. In other words, do you consider the exercises that Joe and Clara taught the archival, as we hear them referred to today, versus maybe, again, what more current forms are being taught from other now that there's this broad range of teaching?
Well, I personally still do Joe's workout exactly as I can best recall
Remember
it,
it.
which is pretty good.
Mhm.
You know, but I also do a lot of other things from time to time that are quite different. Coraline, for example, a really weird apparatus that he would have no connection with.
Yeah. Mhm.
You know, again, you come back to this really fundamental question, which I keep trying not to allow to be divisive in the community. Do you have to stick to the original, or as you call it, archival exercises, or can you invent others? Can you go astray? Can you do a lot of different things? I think if you just stuck to those same exercises, and every one of you guys have been told that this is the only way you can teach it. If you have a better idea of what makes it, helps your client, forget it. I think you'd all quit, and so would your customers. Many of them don't want to continue to learn the depth of movement that you can achieve just on the reformer or the chair or the Cadillac or the mat. They want variety.
As I own 2 studios. I completely understand the business aspects and the need for customers to have your business, believe me. But I worry that not even trying to go that path lessens the quality of what I have to offer. So within my teaching of my clients, even those that I feel may not appreciate the routine that Joe created, the archival exercises, it's my duty, my responsibility to educate them about why the depth of the work is so important, as opposed to cater to just doing something different because I'm worried that they won't stay with me. So I think I understand your point about divisiveness, but
I applaud you. I think that's fabulous. And it can't argue with integrity, and that's what you've got. And you do have the ability and the enthusiasm and the training to impart that. There's 30 million people in the world doing Pilates. So you can't have all 30 million of them, have the availability to get to you.
To do the same thing, right?
And there are a lot of teachers that can keep people moving in very unarchival
Yeah, I guess the question to me is then, is it still called Pilates, or is it just some other awesome form of movement? That's where I have the struggle. It's not that it's not okay. It's not that it's not good, but is it Pilates?
Well, it depends who you talk to. If you talk to me, it's still Pilates, because they're working toward something very basic about Pilates. I mean, so
the foundational aspects are the same.
Ballet, no, but it's dance,
right?
And that the question is, how big a word is Pilates? What does Pilates really mean? And
a never-ending question, right?
I know, and I think it's a wonderful question, and I think that the more that name is used, and the more people are pleased with what they get, not what there is, but what they get out of it. Well, he's achieved something. I mean, The question is, what's the goal here? Is the goal
Yeah.
to,
What is the goal? Always.
and
Yeah.
if the
Why?
goal is to improve people's lives, to keep them moving, to help their health, yeah, there are all kinds of good ways of doing it, but and maybe it's the best way possible is classic or archival Pilates, but the second best way may very well be some offshoot of it. And what's wrong with second best in this? With
Someone
30 million
responded with
people?
that Andrea responded, I believe as a teacher, we can do both, using the fundamentals and sticking to the whys of the exercise while also being a bit creative, thinking about each individual and the system as a whole.
I would agree.
There's another, go ahead. Oh, go ahead,
Well,
Lisa.
I was going to ask the question about the kettlebells in the anatomy pictures. There are some drawings that are said to be Joseph Pilates that were in his studio, and they're anatomy drawings. And in those, the model is holding a kettlebell. Do you remember those at all, John, or were they after?
I don't even, there was no kettlebell in 1967.
I believe there
It didn't
was.
exist.
It was a Russian thing.
Oh,
program.
maybe, but no, I don't remember seeing. Though there were a lot of anatomy drawings, but no skeleton
So
is holding a kettlebell. I can remember.
Figure, it was a person, but it doesn't matter. The question I have for you, and this is something that's come up in this in our community and amongst people who were trained by Romana. And as you can imagine, a lot of them, I mean, I found your book really entertaining, a wonderful read. I learned so much, and I really especially enjoyed the last chapter where you talked about Joe's possible inspiration and where to go from here. But some of the dates surrounding Romana's involvement in the studio and her life in Peru, I think were inaccurate, and I have been proved so in other books. And I felt like, and this is something I've heard from other people, so I just kind of want to hear your point of view. I felt like she was dealt an unfair hand in the book, and especially at a time when she has no ability to answer since she's gone. I'm just curious about what your relationship with her was like that caused you to paint such a unflattering picture.
Well, it's funny, or actually disturbing that you think I was unflattering. Romana saved Pilates. I made that absolutely clear in the book. Had she not come along, had she not agreed to take over 9 West 56th Street, Pilates would have disappeared. We would have closed the doors. We had no other choice. And she not only saved it, she preserved it. And I think I made that absolutely clear in the book. She actually did add a lot of ballet, or more language than changes. Maybe she asked you to turn out a little bit more, or occasionally she'd say to someone who knew what she was talking about, third position or something. But no, she kept it very, very, very close to what she remembered of Joe. And I also thought I made it clear that I spent a lot of time with Romana. I was up in the studio as a student at least twice a week, and I came up once a week, not as a student, so I could go back in the little room and look at the numbers and see how we were doing, and seeing how the records were being kept, and seeing where the money was being spent. I was very responsible to the people who had invested at that point. I wasn't thinking, geez, we got to keep this going because one day millions of people will be doing it. I was just trying to keep it going for us. And people put in money. And I spent time with her. And on Sundays, at least once a month, maybe more, she had a sort of a salon on Sunday afternoon. And she had artists, particularly dancers, a lot of musicians, violin players, piano players, and they all came up and everyone drank champagne and had a great time, starting around 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And I was there all the time. And I couldn't have thought any highlier of anyone than I did of Ramona. She was a fantastic teacher. She ran the studio. She was full of integrity, full of enthusiasm, full of energy. And it was great. It went on for, 8 years or so. Where the break occurred, and it occurred against what I was trying to talk to her about, which she wouldn't listen to, is when she decided that she was the only one on earth that could define Pilates. When she decided that if you didn't do it her way, you weren't doing Pilates, and that there was no room for anyone else, including people like Kathy Grant, no one else could exist.
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt, because it was Ramona who gave Kathy the job at Bendel's. That was something that was told to all of her proteges. And she, in fact, was there after Joe opened that studio. And they were close friends. And in fact, Kathy was known to come to her house every year until the lawsuit.
No. She did not give that job to Kathy.
That's what she told all of
Gerald,
her people.
Yeah, well, that's what she told people, but it's not true. Geraldine Stutz, who owned Bendel's, hired someone else first, then hired Kathy Grant. And she knew Kathy Grant from going to Joe's. That's where it came from. It didn't come from Ramona. That's part of a myth that's not true. So anyhow, when she took over this position in the lawsuit that, Sean Gallagher had everything to do with, and maybe Ramona had very little to do with, but Sean knew how to manipulate and push her button. And she took over this position. I tried to call her. I called her. I said, Ramona, you can't do this. You don't have any legal basis for it, but you don't have a moral basis for it. How could Sean Gallagher own the name Pilates? How could that be? Well, what do you do to get it? It's not, it doesn't exist. Please do not pursue this thing. Mm-hmm. And she hung up on me. And I tried to call her back. She wouldn't take the call or hung up right away. I gave up. Yeah. Ramona's kids babysat, and her grandkids babysat for me and for my brother. So any implication that you have that I try to put Ramona down, no, I'm very critical of what she did. And I didn't like her behavior afterwards. She had no business, in my mind, trying to separate everybody, to make it only hers, to try to get exclusive control. And maybe she did it with some commercial motivation, but Sean Gallagher, that's all he did. He wasn't a Pilates teacher. He didn't get certified. Ramona taught him what he knew, and to all of a sudden monopolize and send people cease and desist letters when we're just getting back alive and started, and suing people, and serving them process on Christmas Eve, and going after Ken Endelman. No, come on. That was
Thank you.
Horrible.
I appreciate you answering that, because it is something that's come up from quite a few people that I've talked to, and not an easy question to answer. And I appreciate you talking about it.
I'm very, heated about this thing, because
It was a difficult time.
Well, it wasn't that difficult. She could have come along, and I've tried to speak to Shari since, and I haven't tried to speak to Paul. I didn't know him that well, but I knew Shari very well.
Mhm.
And, something happened somewhere, and they became very autocratic about it. And it's hurt the movement. It really has.
I think it's hard to separate emotion. Clearly she was passionate about her work and what she did. And it's hard sometimes to put each other in each other's shoes, I suppose. But, I don't know that. Obviously I was new to the whole thing when that was all going down, but I think sometimes, it could be commercial reasons, but it could also be just an internal passion that someone has, and it gets taken the wrong way,
Yeah, but tolerance goes a long way. Mm-hmm. Intolerance doesn't go very far, and that's what we got. Mm-hmm. I mean, the lawsuit was horrible.
Yeah, it was hard for everybody. Elise she has her hand raised, so I'd like to give her a chance to speak.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. First of all, John, I loved that book. It filled in so many gaps and holes. So I came to Pilates in '87, right when I bought the studio. And I just wanted, we were taught, it was our mother's milk, that it was Romana or way or nothing. And that was my introduction to Pilates. And I just want to put in my 2 cents about Sean. I was close to Sean when this all started happening. And for him too, he believed what Romana was telling him, that her way was the only way. And he went for it. He did this in a terrible way. I completely agree with you. Just callous and wrong. But he believed, because I talked to him about it, genuinely believed that if he didn't do this, and put a lock on everybody else, that the method was going to be watered down and it would be meaningless. He said, yeah, it'll be like, this generic term that anybody can banter about and it will completely lose its integrity. And really that was his main motivation. And I think he got, I think Romana fed into that. And that was his approach. I mean, he did it absolutely in the wrong way. I wouldn't argue that, but that was his thinking. It was that he was trying to preserve. He really wanted to preserve it. And I think, down the line he'd make some money, but that was it. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Well, I appreciate that, but I can tell you, I have looked at the notes and the documents that he and Ken Edelman negotiated over the course of 3 years. And you cannot look at those documents and think this was just to preserve the name. He or his lawyers or whoever, they grabbed for more and more. And every time Ken yielded a little, they put more conditions on it. They wanted more money for the same thing. And Ken at that time was also, on the brink of becoming a lot larger, and wasn't at the time. And his hold was on everybody. The cease and desist letters, yeah, you can say they're bad, but they were economic things. You pay me or you can't call your studio Pilates. What has that got to do with integrity? Nothing. It's got to do with money. And I went through all of that. I was deeply involved in the beginning, middle, end of that lawsuit. And I can tell you, I never for one moment thought that anything was involved but monetizing Joe's name. And you can think what you want, Elise, but I'm not going to agree or disagree with you, really. I don't want any arguments with anyone, but I can tell you from my viewpoint, and I was there, And I've looked at so many documents, and indeed we're going through another little thing where he's trying to stop studios from using pictures and stuff like that. I can tell you this has got nothing to do with preserving the work. It's got everything to do with sitting back and taking money from someone who's working very hard to stay alive.
And
He
perhaps
doesn't give a
being
damn
the
about
one
that.
of some way, in some way. I would love to change the topic because I think there's a lot.
Me too.
Because we like you, and I think there's a lot of wonderful things that you remember about the studio. And of course, as Pilates teachers and enthusiasts who've never had the chance to meet Joe, we're all wondering, like, all the things, like, what was your first lesson like? And like, what was a day in the studio like? What was Clara like? Do you have any remembrances?
Oh, sure. Well, I think I tried to do the best I could. I'm not. This is
How about that shower incident? That was the best part of the book.
Tell us about the shower.
The first, I tried to do the best I could write it. I haven't written the book. I just about what the studio was like. The classic picture that's in the book and is on many people's walls with Joe and Clara and Joe's niece Anna, scattered about the studio, very dramatic postures. That's what the studio was like. It was very old-fashioned, very had Oriental carpet on the floor. Is that an okay term for carpet? Sure. I don't know.
It works.
Anyhow, it had those things on the floor. The wood was all very well burnished and polished. When I was there, the feet on the were not lion's feet on the performers. It was just a straight piece of wood down to the floor. But and the photographs, every inch of the wall, several busts of Joe, very high ceilings. And that was the studio was like. What it was like to be in there is hard for people today to imagine, because studios today, there may be a couple of privates going on or a class, or they're very organized. There's a receptionist in a lot of them. It was the most closely organized chaos that you can imagine. People came in, I'll just talk for myself. You came in, you went to so-called locker room, which I described, which is a teeny, very inadequate facility. No lockers, no room, but a locker room. You got changed into your uniform, which it was. And men, it was just shorts and the little canvas shoes. Women, it was a leotard, no top, no shirt over it, nothing. I don't think maybe they tied something in their hair, and the same shoes, but no tights or collar or anything. And you went out and you grabbed a machine, or if there wasn't anyone on it, or if there was, and looked, there's a mat. So you went on a mat, or you went on the Cadillac, or you even exercised on the chair, but that was a very short exercise, or the pedipole. You found something to do if you could. If everything was taken, you had to leave, because you couldn't sit there. There was no place to sit, wasn't allowed anyhow. You had to leave and come back. So what you did when you walked in the door and you walked right into the studio is you looked around, you said, oh, okay, well, there'll be reformer. And you rush like hell to get your clothes off and on and out there before someone else came in. And if there's someone else was in the men's room with me, or a women's room, you were racing against them. It was a mad race to get on a machine when it was busy. When it wasn't busy, no problem.
What were the busy times of day?
Busy times of the day were always from 5 o'clock on in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. It was usually a pretty good crowd around 12 to 1 or 2. Don't forget, these were the only people in the world that did Pilates. And this was the only place, well, a little Corolla, a little Kathy and Mary also, but very little. This was it. And this was where Joe was. So this is where people congregated. And so you rushed in, and you went to work on your reformer. Let's say you got one. So you sat down, you put your feet up on the foot bar, you started to do your footwork, you did everything. And if Clara was there or Joe was there and they saw something or heard something they didn't like, they'd help you out. Or Bob Seed, or any John, any of the people up there, Hannah. And you just did your routine, and you went through it for 45 minutes or an hour. And when you finished wherever you were, you thought, well, I could take a little more. Maybe you hung on the trapeze, or you did some stretches on the Cadillac, or pushed the bar through, or sat on the chair. You would never really go from the reformer to the mat. You'd go the other way around if you couldn't get on a reformer. Mm-hmm. And it was chaos, but quiet, no noise, couldn't talk to anyone, couldn't stop. So you just worked, and you could go, Joe and Clara could both be in the studio. And you could go through, once you learned everything, you could go through your 45 minutes or an hour. No one kept time on you. And you could say no more to Joe than hello, goodbye. And same Clara, you wouldn't, maybe she'd say something to you and you'd say, oh, that'd be it. How'd you go?
So you wouldn't necessarily like have a lesson or have someone correcting you the whole time. On any given day, it could be, but on any given day.
You couldn't make an appointment.
Yeah.
There was no way to do it.
Right.
Now, that's me. If you were Maria Callas, or George Balanchine, or Suzanne Farrell, or any of the stars of the day, mm-hmm. they did get some kind through Clara. They would have a time. Mm-hmm. I had a time, mm-hmm. but it wasn't official time. It was the time I got up very early to get a time. Mm-hmm. And Joe had some attraction, to me. So he would be there.
The mornings were busy as well then.
The mornings, yeah, a little after me, from maybe 10 to 11 maybe, and then it picked up at 12 or so. It was very, well, it wasn't the way you could run a business very well. It was chaotic, but but because it was so quiet, and because the few people in the world that were doing it were all dedicated to it, it was well organized. I mean, everyone knew what to do. After Joe died, I thought, oh my God, now what? Yeah. And everyone just kept doing it. It kept going by itself.
Did he ever talk about the summer house that he had in Beckett, Massachusetts, or his time teaching at Jacob's Pillow. Did he share that with you much? Or
well, I knew about it. I went up there once.
Yeah.
I got him. He was well beyond his prime when I met him.
Yeah.
And well beyond his enthusiasm for Jacob's Pillow. I mean, at the prime, which was probably in the 50s, maybe early 60s, he would have 30 or 40 people come over. The whole dance thing at Jacob's Pillow would come over, and he'd have them all out in the field, which was sort of behind his house. And he'd have them up at 6 a.m. doing exercise. He had them in the winter. They'd come out over. He'd have people come over in the winter, and he'd be out there in his shorts in the snow, and he'd have people out there in the snow doing exercises. But that was really before me. I just went up there once. It was a little creepy, a little quiet. He was old already. I met him when he was 81. Yeah. So,
John.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
Go ahead, Elisa. I had a quote I wanted to say before we wrap up. So go ahead.
No, that was it. I was just going to open it up to if anybody had any other questions to please let us know and we can ask them. But if there aren't any, I'll just turn it over to you, Cheryl.
Thank you. So on page 29, I wanted to leave with these parted words. I'm quoting you on page 29 near the bottom. You were talking about your work with Joe, and you said, quote unquote, he was a dream coach. He was the dream coach. He made me want to try harder by making me feel good. He made me chase those good feelings of accomplishment by accomplishing more. And the more I sensed that he saw what I accomplished, the better I felt. I desperately needed someone to acknowledge that I was giving it my all. And I was thinking that all of our clients, they want to be seen and they want to feel accomplished and they want to feel recognized and acknowledged of that. And I thought that was a really great quote for us to leave with, to realize that we can channel Joe. We can't be Joe, but we can channel Joe and be the best Pilates instructor or coach, keeping those words in mind. I thought that was really a great quote that you said there, John.
Well, thank
you for that.
It came up in a psychological context, because I gave a huge amount of thought to why I did all this. Well, why? I mean, I didn't get paid or had any feeling that I was preserving this legacy or that I was, hoping to see it grow or anything. I none of those. It came out of a feeling of my own life, really, which I dealt with, of having parents who really didn't acknowledge achievement because it was never enough. And for all of you, it's always enough. That's the point. Joe, no matter what you did, it was enough. You were there. You tried. Okay, let's keep going. And if you make people feel good about that, they'll stay, because I think that's an
amazing takeaway. So
it really is.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Empowering the way you described that in the book, and it made me feel excited. And that's exactly what I felt when I started Pilates, and I think all of us can relate to. So you really, really communicated that beautifully.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, John, for sharing your time with us today. I really enjoyed speaking with you and getting to meet you via Zoom.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and I hope people enjoyed the book. I got a lot out of writing it, but I've got a lot more out of talking about it. It's a lot of fun. Thank you.